right, everybody. Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, November 16th. It is the Public Health and Safety Committee. Everyone is here. We've got Councilwoman Porterfield and Bircher who are not here, but we do have plenty of people for a quorum. I do have a consent agenda. I'd like to go through all the resolutions, unless anybody has an objection or wants anything pulled off. Nope. Okay, we'll go ahead and start. RS 2021-1233 accepted a coronavirus emergency supplemental funding CESF grant from the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration to the Davidson County Juvenile Court to continue to enhance the court's COVID-19 preparedness plan to purchase personal protective equipment to minimize exposure to hazards in the workplace. RS 2021-1235 authorizes the Metro government to join the state of Tennessee and other local governments as participants in the Tennessee State Subdivision Opioid Abatement Agreement and approving the related settlement agreements. RS 2021-1242 approves an agreement to detail for the Public Health Associate Program, PHAP, between the Metro Board of Health and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, to provide an associate to assist public health agencies in developing, implementing, and evaluating public health programs. RS 2021-1243 accepts a grant from the Step Ahead Foundation of Middle Tennessee Incorporated to the Metro Board of Health to provide reimbursement for certain costs associated with providing long-acting reversible contraception. RS 2021-1244 accepts a Nashville Health Accelerator Plan grant from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to the Metro Board of Health to address social determinants of health to improve chronic disease outcomes among persons experiencing health disparities and inequities. RS 2021-1245 approves Amendments 1 and 2 to the Healthy Start Initiative, eliminating racial ethnic disparities grant from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to the Metro Board of Health to provide a variety of services in reducing infant mortality for pregnant and parenting women. RS 2021-1246 approves Amendments 2 and 3 to a grant from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to the Metro Board of Health to enhance access to a comprehensive continuum of high-quality, community-based care for low-income individuals and families with HIV disease. RS 2021-1247 approves Amendment 2 to a grant from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to the Metro Board of Health to provide for the prevention, surveillance, diagnosis, and treatment of HIV/AIDS and administer Minority AIDS Initiative Program. RS 2021-1248 accepts a grant from the Friends of Metro Animal Care and Control to the Metro Board of Health to provide funding for emergency medical care for shelter animals. RS 2021-1249 accepts a grant from the Marjorie A. Newhoff Private Foundation Incorporated to the Metro Board of Health to provide funding for the care of shelter animals and Metro Animal Care and Control. Do I have a motion?
Move. So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? No. All right. Okay. So now we'll go to RS 2021-1251, a resolution to repeal resolution number RS 2018-1171 related to the vehicle inspection program.
Move
Do I have a
approval.
motion? All right.
Second.
All right. It's been moved and properly seconded. We do have an amendment. Do I need to move the amendment first?
You can.
Or after now that it's on the
You
floor?
can choose when to do it. If you want to discuss the bill first,
Okay,
you can
we'll
also
go ahead
move
and
the
do-
amendment now. I mean, it's up to.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and open the floor for discussion.
Councilmember Roden?
Yeah, Councilmember Roten, are you there?
I don't think
I
he's gonna
don't
be able to
think-
make it to committee.
Oh, okay.
He was here. He
Oh,
was.
is he?
I think he might have stepped out.
I'll go look.
Well, it was discussed last night. I'll go ahead and I'll take it if you don't mind.
Okay.
Well,
It was,
there's been some development
yeah.
since then.
yeah, I know.
Okay.
Is Mr. Sharp, do you want to speak to the developments that have occurred since last night?
My understanding is that Councilman Roden was going to agree to the deferral to January the 4th, but I assume.
Okay, let me recognize Councilman O'Connell.
Thanks. He spoke to me actually in between committees, and as the second sponsor of the bill, I think he wanted me to be aware of this. He had mentioned agreeing with Metro Public Health Department to defer to January 4th for a period of diligence, and so I think it's appropriate for this committee to recommend a deferral to January 4th meeting.
I think there's another piece to that as well, and which would actually push the effective date out past, January 14th, so I don't know that Councilman Johnson.
I spoke to him also, I don't know if anybody, but I spoke to him
Okay,
also.
go ahead, Councilman
So,
Miller.
so I think the agreement is this, and I'm okay, if we defer until, is it January 4th, is that the January 1st meeting in January? If we defer that, as opposed to having everything shut down by the 14th, everything would be shut down by the 28th. So it would still be done before the end of the month in January, provided that it passes on January the 4th. So we still would be in line with the time that we talked about, just a 2-week basic. But I think, and I will defer to Mr. Sharp on this, I think the conversation is that you go ahead and start working with the company and saying, okay, so it's not catching anybody off guard. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, we have to give them 30 days notice per the contract, and they've agreed that 24 days under these circumstances is sufficient. We'll have all that in writing, so that if it comes about, then that's when it will happen.
Then I'm gonna move that we defer until January 4th.
Second.
Sorry, I'm there.
No, that's okay. I just, so my amendment was to put a date certain of, January the 14th, which if we've agreed to January the 28th, that's fine. I just wanna make sure that we get that in writing.
We certainly will.
Okay, so at that point, I won't move my amendment. Thank
Okay,
you.
Very good. All right, all those in favor of deferring to
Councilman,
Oh,
Madam
I'm
Sorry.
sorry, I didn't see you over there.
Thank you,
Apologize.
I'm just hiding back here in the corner of the Porterfield. I'll say that my concern with the deferral, with doing this tonight, is that there are a lot of people expecting this emissions program to end. It's going to be widely reported on the news that the Metro Council declined to end the emissions program by voting to defer tonight, and it's gonna blow, it's not gonna be a good look for us. We know it's ending anyway. And on top of that, there are people who are making plans about whether they need to make unnecessary car repairs or not, and we're gonna be, leading into the holidays, leaving them in limbo, and that's why I'm voting against deferral tonight.
Hey,
So,
Councilman
so
Glover?
let me say this, certainly a lot of the folks that fall into my camp want it ended. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is a 2-week period. I don't mind talking to anybody saying, look, we're really only moving this needle by 2 weeks. That's all we're doing. I firmly believe it's gonna pass on the 4th of January. I understand what you're saying, council member, but we also have, you have jobs, there's things that are occurring. I think that it's probably important to do this, but I also think that the message can be sent that we are not shrugging this to the sidelines, that we fully intend on going forward with it. Council Lady Johnson has removed it because we've said the deal is January 28th. So even if we passed it tonight, it would have been January 14th. We have a 2-week lull in here. So I don't really have heartburn on it, and I understand what's being said, but I don't have heartburn with it. Thank you, Chair.
Councilman Nash?
Kind of question for the rule makers. If we passed the resolution tonight, could we come back with an amendment with the date certain on the 4th?
And we could always make a motion, if we pass this tonight, we could make a motion to rescind if something changed, for that matter. Passing it tonight, it's not the end of the world, the end of the conversation necessarily.
But we also could put a date certain on it on the 4th.
Sure you
Would
can.
defer to legal.
So, could you repeat
If we
that question?
pass the resolution as is tonight, could we come back on the 4th with an amendment to it?
No.
No.
And I don't know that a motion to rescind would work either under the state law. So,
All right.
yeah, basically, if you pass this resolution, it's going to opt us, we had opted out of the state law. This opts us back in, and then we are governed by the state law. We no longer have any, discretion.
Okay.
So, thinking out loud as far as possibilities, because I understand what Councilman Rosenberg is saying, and, if it's not communicated properly, a deferral does have a bad look. Is it possible to, on the fly, change my amendment to say the 28th, which is what we've all agreed to, and pass it tonight to end on the 28th? Is that possible?
It'd be a late amendment.
Okay,
May I?
Yeah.
Could she go ahead and move her amendment tonight and then change it on the 4th vote?
no, because it's a
Well,
resolution.
I get what you're saying. So
Hold on.
you could amend it, and then when it's back up on January 4th, you could offer another amendment to change
That's
the
right.
date.
That's right, that's what I was asking.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, so we go ahead and we pass your 14th tonight, and then on the 4th, you can come back in and move it to the 28th.
But to Councilman Rosenberg's point, we've still made a deferral. He's trying to avoid the deferral
And then
in
you-
general.
And then, in my opinion, you further complicate things if you defer this and then you put a date on there that's not
Yeah.
really going
And
to.
then you have to
be
change it.
You're
Yeah.
really kind of misleading people at that point.
Let me recognize, Councilwoman.
Just a
Allen.
procedural question. If we pass this tonight, the program has to continue until the 14th. If it ends on the 18th, people who have to renew their cars by February 1, do any of those scenarios change anything? I mean, if it's done before February 1 and your car expires, you don't have to get tested, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure to what extent the surrounding counties are gonna test January cars. Since the program will not be in place the entire month, it may be that the 14 days in January would be to pick up those in February who didn't get there.
Right.
Let me get Councilwoman Gamble,
Yeah.
please.
Thank you. I just want to speak in support of the deferral. I appreciate the motion to do that, to provide for more due diligence and just making sure that all parties involved are aware and able to make arrangements that they need, just like those who may have car repairs. So I think the deferral provides an opportunity for all parties involved to have a better understanding, get on the same page before we move forward with this. We know that we want to move forward with it, but just giving those 2 weeks of due diligence allows for less confusion. So I want to speak in support of the deferral.
Councilwoman Johnston, did you have?
I typically agree with you, but I think it adds to the confusion. If we, at this point, I'm confused, to be honest with you. I don't know. So, we've made this agreement as far as like, so we're gonna end the emissions on the 28th.
I'm sorry. That agreement is that if the ordinance or the resolution passes on the 4th, that's assuming that resolution passes, and I know y'all all think it is, it may or may not.
Well, no, you just changed the whole
Yeah,
game.
you did. So I'm gonna move my
You just
amendment
changed the
now.
whole game now.
I'm gonna move my amendment to make this a date certain on the 14th, and and I'm gonna not support a deferral either.
So since we have a deferral motion on the floor, do we need to do something with that?
The deferral
I'd
motion.
like to speak
You
I'd
would
like to speak
on the
Okay.
deferral.
All right.
My question is, if you are due for October, November, December, the program's over. I mean, basically, if you're due to have your car certain emissions, you're not going.
Right.
So we're in essence killing this program anyway. So I move that we should just move forward with this tonight.
So can the deferral motion be withdrawn for a moment to put the amendment on and then vote as amended?
Who made them?
I did, but I'm
If
listening.
you'd like to withdraw the motion, you can, yeah, and then we'd be on a motion to approve and then, yeah.
Okay, I will withdraw the motion to get the amendment on this.
I'll move my amendment, which
Second.
puts a date certain on January, whatever J month, January the 14th.
You want to speak on the deferral?
Well,
Now we got them.
you want to go ahead and get her amendment on?
Yeah.
You need.
We'll go ahead and do that. Okay, all those in favor of Councilwoman Johnston's amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, now we're back on the bill as amended. Yes, sir.
So I would renew the motion to defer to January 1st with a brief explanation. You know, we're talking about a lot of things here, but there's a reason for this deferral, and we'll be able to still honor these deadlines with respect to the January date. We're just pushing it out 2 weeks. So I don't know what's so confusing about that. And really, probably the guy that can give us the best explanation for the need for this deferral would be Mr. Jameson, if you'd be willing to speak to it.
So we just want to make sure the council is aware of all of the implications of a termination, because the health department, the mayor's office, we are not yet certain. We don't yet know what the Biden administration is going to do with the EPA limits on ozone. That's reviewed every 5 years, and they have made clear that they want to review that now, before the 5-year period. For my money, you don't review a standard prematurely if your intention is to keep it where it's at. They plan to do something, is our best guess. Right now, the ozone limit for Davidson County is 70
70 parts per billion. On a good day, Davidson County hovers around 65. And the majority of the particulates and the ozone in the atmosphere comes from car emissions. That's the issue that you have the greatest control over. So if the Biden administration suddenly sets it to 65 or 60, we're in trouble. And you've just lost your biggest control mechanism. The next largest contaminant for the air quality in Tennessee is interstate trucking, but this council does not have a shred of authority over interstate trucking. That is a federal preemption. So before you lose that tool, can we make sure we have a chance to find out what the feds are gonna do so that you don't step into something unwillingly or unknowingly? We may come back and say this is absolutely the right thing to do by January 4th. Can we just have the time to vet that for you?
We recognize Councilwoman Porterfield.
Thank you, Chair. If I may direct a question to Mr. Jameson, what happens if we don't know what the Biden administration is doing by January? What if they don't make a decision until next December?
We'll know more than we do today, which is next to nothing. If it's terminated, we cannot reinstate the program without the express permission of the EPA.
They have to be mandated by the EPA.
Mandated.
So there's a possibility that we'll get to January, if the Biden administration has not expressed their intent in January, we still would not be in a position to vote on it, which means that we would be potentially looking at another deferral.
Well, so you've got under the state legislation a January cutoff, so that's your window of opportunity. The issue with respect to the vendor contracts, that's just a matter of contract with the vendor. They have 30 days to insist that we clear with them. We'll do that. There'll be a 2-week layover, if you will. That's not the trouble. The only thing we're trying to make sure that you know and that we have the chance to find out is what is it the administration, the DC administration is going to do with respect to ozone levels, and we don't know that yet.
Councilwoman Johnston.
Thank you. My concern about waiting for that is that I feel like if all of the Middle Tennessee area was on the same page, that would be a whole different story. But because we have so many cars and trucks and 18-wheelers and whatever that are coming in from surrounding states and counties that are not being tested, they're not going to be tested, they've ended their program with the state law. So we would still be this tiny little county with respect to all the cars. We would be the only one doing this testing, which I don't know that that's necessarily going to move the needle so much, just because everyone else around us is not going to be doing anything. So is it really going to be helping?
So one of the other things that we will do during this interim period is quantifying for you what elimination of the program will mean for the parts per billion. The last I had understood, it's a 3-point difference. Now that sounds like nothing, but if we're in a game of inches where the EPA has lowered it by 2 points and we're at 65, that's trouble. And I would just rather you know where the goalposts are when you make your decision. And with respect, as the analysis stated, the other counties that are terminating it have all designated January 14th. You're keeping track with them. You're not losing any ground. And all you're doing is making sure you know exactly what you're stepping into.
Councilmember Nash.
We're at a point where we've been doing testing now, and all the surrounding counties have been doing testing. And you're telling me we average about 65 parts per million on a good day. Now when we've got all these surrounding counties shutting down their programs, I think it's highly unfair to ask Metro residents to just kind of stick with the program when you've already said we're not going to be able to get that level down.
I totally hear you. And if I go to Hamlin County during rush hour, that's 3 cars and a tractor. And no disrespect to anybody from Hamlin County, I love it. Rush hour here and the volume of traffic in Davidson County makes our emissions program a very significant factor in air quality control. It does. And if you forsake that, maybe it's the right thing to do. Maybe we will be here January 4th celebrating with you. Let's just make sure we know exactly what we're doing before we do it, especially if we're keeping track with everybody else's termination that's terminating it at the same time we do.
Okay. Councilman Glover.
We do need to clarify that the tractor doesn't have to go through emissions. And pollutes a whole lot more than my Suburban.
So, I'm gonna address this to Ms. Hannah. if we pass this tonight, what are the options to rescind it if there's data that comes back in?
I don't think that there's an opportunity
All right,
to
so
rescind
now I'm gonna
this.
ask this question, because the other counties have already gotten rid of it. Would they not have to go through the same hoops that we'd have to go through in order to reinstate it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, that's what the state law did. The state law basically made it so that no county can have an emissions program unless it's mandated by the EPA,
Okay.
Except for this one.
except for Davidson County, because we opted out of that.
Well, I'm not gonna get started on things that we've done in Davidson County, so, yeah.
I would say this right now, the Williamson County emissions testing places are already closed.
So
There's nobody there.
I would love if somebody could check my math on this, but it's my understanding that Davidson County goes from about 700,000 to about 1.2 million every day when all the surrounding contiguous counties come into work. And when they leave, we go back, and that's what I've read. I don't know that number's, I'd love somebody to fact check it. If that's true, what are Nashvilleians gonna perceive this as? Is anything but that we're just the only one not participating. We're forcing them to pay basically a tax that is undeserved, because our population is really not made up of Nashvilleians. I'm looking at you, Hannah, but I'm not asking for you. I'm not asking for you to answer that. That was more to the ethos, but.
All right.
But Madam Chairman, can I say one thing?
Absolutely.
That's a fair point. I get all this, I really do. The issue is if the standard is lower and we are right at or out of compliance, we will have a tool that we can go to the EPA and say, this is what we're doing to try to get this back under control. The other counties won't be able to do that. They won't have anything else they can possibly use. We have talked about if we kept the infrastructure in place and we had, say, 30% of the fleet goes through, can be pulled out of the garages through remote sensing, which we have a contract to do. We haven't been able to turn the switch on the contract because until the EPA action in August, it was against the law. But it's not now. We could use that now. We could make this more user-friendly to try to relieve some of this frustration, so that if we do get to a point where we need the tool to try to stay, if we're really close to out of compliance, if we want to stay right here, we'll have it to try to keep us there and not go out of compliance. The non-compliance, Steve, can be a very difficult thing economically. They can, I'm not saying they would do this, but the authority of the EPA is there to say if you add a point source of pollution of any kind, you have to have an offset before you can put that in there. And that can be really tough on you economically. They can tell you can't build a new road or widen a road because you can't add capacity for your drive. Or they can slow all that stuff down with paperwork, bureaucracy, if you're out of compliance. It's not a place you really want to be. And we will be the only ones, if we kept the infrastructure afloat, that would have that tool that we could use. You're right, the surrounding counties won't have it. They're going to be down there hoping that everybody buys an electric car because that's going to be about all they can do. We would at least have a chance to do something.
Councilwoman Johnson.
I just don't know how much it's gonna move the needle if Davidson County is the only one that is gonna have any sort of emissions when we've got no one else participating. I also don't know how the EPA, who has come out and said this is no longer necessary, and then they're gonna reduce the threshold to make it necessary again, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I know it's too late for me to call the question, but I wish somebody would.
Councilman McConnell.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple thoughts here. One, my understanding is the lead sponsor was comfortable with the deferral to January 4th. I'm here basically just supporting his interest in looking at the deferral. I will say, in the bigger picture though, Nashville has a variety of tools at our disposal that we're not using and haven't used historically, right? I mean, we are years behind, potentially decades behind in building out a transit system, which is another thing that Tennessee counties can't do as easily as we can. We could deliver multimodal infrastructure more quickly and efficiently. We maybe are turning the corner on that, but there are a variety of tools in our tool belt. I think everybody in the room is going to be hoping to celebrate on January 4th, if not tonight. And so I don't look at this as a critical tool, but I think, in deference to the sponsor, I'm also comfortable. I mean, to me, whether it's tonight or January 4th, my sense is that the will of the body is gonna be that this program ends by January 28th, so that's all.
14th.
Okay, I keep hearing about the tool, and maybe I'm not comprehending something. Is there someone here that can answer the question on the tool?
Our Chief Sustainability Officer, Kendra Abkowitz, I think many of you met her, if not.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to kind of some of the other ways or other potential approaches that we can look at as metro government to potentially reduce emissions. So as Mr. Sharp mentioned, typically when we're looking at compliance with EPA's National Ambient Air Quality Standards, we're looking at what are called stationary sources and then also mobile sources. So this particular program is one that attempts to control mobile source emissions. And so there are a variety of other additional actions that we could take. Eliminating this program would increase the pressure and the extent to which we need to rely on those other tools to actually seek those mobile source emissions.
Mr. Weaver, you work with other counties as well, don't you? And, I mean, you don't just work in Davidson County. Are you familiar with this for others?
Councilman
Or
Glover,
may I?
you're out of order.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to quickly finish, if I may. So looking at improvements to mass transit and increasing utilization of that is one. Looking at installing electric vehicle infrastructure is another. Obviously, that relies quite a bit on the public adopting use of those different mechanisms. We also, as metro government agencies, can convert our fleets to electric vehicles or other sorts of fuel sources that don't produce nearly as many greenhouse gas emissions when they're operated. And then we can also look at things like restoring green spaces, investing in tree canopy efforts. And so those are a variety of things we can all do. But again, it's going to take, I think, a multifaceted and multi-pronged approach.
Is there any other discussion on the deferral?
I would just say, I think that I agree with Councilman Rosenberg 100%, and that we need to listen to the will of our constituents, which has been overwhelming, and not create confusion. Pass this tonight with a date certain of January the 14th and move on.
And I want to say, I agree completely. Let's just send a clear message to Nashvillians that we're trying to, I mean, if it's inevitable and it's going to happen in 2 weeks or 3, let's do it tonight. Let's send a clear message that we're trying to help, that at least we're trying to do this. I think this will be much better perceived if we do it tonight than in January.
Okay, Councilwoman Gamble.
I just have to say that I discussed this topic at a community meeting this past Saturday, and not everyone was very anxious to end the program. Some people do want to get more information and get more validation before moving forward. They think it's a good idea, but just would like to have more clarity and information on that. And so for those reasons, I still support the deferral.
All right. Can I call the question?
You're the chair.
Yes, you can.
All right, close
call
the
the
discussion. Thank you for your comments. All those in favor of the deferral?
Aye.
Okay, so we got 4. All those opposed?
No.
All right. The deferral motion fails.
I'm on the bill
All
as
right.
amended.
Yep, now we're on the bill as amended. All those in favor of the bill as amended?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right. Passes. All right, thank you very much. Move on to, let's see the room clear. All right, Bill 2021-973 by Stiles and Porterfield, an ordinance to amend Title 8 of the Metro Code of Laws related to animals. Councilwoman Stiles.
Thank you, Chair. So there is, oh, there she is. Councilmember Benedict has an amendment to this bill, which I would like to get placed on the bill. And then I would actually like to defer it one meeting.
Okay. Councilwoman Benedict, I'd like to recognize you to share your amendment.
Thank you, Chair. So the amendment just specifies that this is about dogs that are outside of a fenced-in yard, whether that's an invisible fence or a fence. So the amendment just clarifies that the bill does not apply to dogs inside of a fence, whether that's a fence you can see or an electric fence.
All right. Let's vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the Councilwoman Benedict's amendment?
I'd like to move the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
Second, is it seconded? All right. All those in favor of the amendment?
Discussion.
Oh, yeah, I apologize. Any discussion on the amendment? My head's swimming about emissions.
If I may say, it is considered a friendly amendment by the
Okay.
bill's sponsor. Sorry, I left that out.
Is there any discussion on the amendment? No? All right, all those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
All right. Anyone opposed? All right, we're back on the bill as
Thank
amended.
you, Chair. If I'd like to go for deferral, but I'd like to give a brief comment to say what this bill actually is.
Yes,
Please
please.
So, the way that the code is written right now for vicious dogs, it's very broad. It does not specify exactly what it means to be a vicious dog. So this specifies that it's menacing behavior, it's a dog that is charging people. It also works on the Fourth Amendment so that if animal control needs to remove an animal, they would be covered legally. So they could go to environmental court, either the director or any of the animal control officers, go to environmental court, say that there's been an issue with a particular dog, and ask if they can go and get that dog, put it in the kennel until the court date. That currently that doesn't exist. So, and also right now, the way it's set, the expectation in order to remove a dog is that a dog has to bite someone and constituents have to bleed in order for us to take a dog away. Yes.
Discussion on the bill.
Yeah, so I have so to the amendment and the bill, the intent of the bill, I get it. So I have a situation where I have a vicious dog, or a constituent that the neighbor has a vicious dog. There is a fence, but the dog very easily jumps over the fence. So in essence, there's not a fence, but there is a fence. Is there a way to handle that while we're doing this?
So, and I have a very similar situation where the dogs are jumping
Sorry.
over the fence and running around in the neighborhood. So, this really only serves once that animal jumps over the fence. But the minute it's over that fence, this applies to the dog. I mean, it could be right over the fence, and someone could see it, take a picture of it, let animal control know that it's out, it's not on a leash, it's not being cared for. Another item that this bill covers, right now, our animal control officers could go out numerous times to the same house to try and serve a citation. I've seen them do it at least 10 times at one house. After 3 times, they then just send certified mail, they send the citation to the individual, and this will cut back on useless visits as well.
Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you, Chair, and I just want to thank Councilwoman Stiles for bringing this legislation. Currently, we have a vicious dog in our community that is terrorizing our community. We have senior citizens that cannot walk down the street. We have children that can't walk from the school bus because a dog is terrorizing everyone. And we've tried to work to get it taken care of, but the way that the process stands, I understand why the process is the way that it is, but that doesn't give any relief to the people in the community that can't walk down their street without being afraid of being attacked by a dog. So I support Councilwoman Stiles' legislation, hence me being a co-sponsor on the legislation, and I would ask that our colleagues do support this deferral and at the appropriate time to support passage of the legislation.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Just, what's the sponsor's wish for how many, for 1 meeting or 2 meetings?
It's for 1 meeting. We're actually going to be getting together. There's been a change at animal control since this bill was put together, and so the director is now gone, and so in their absence, we've discovered a few other items. So we're going to get together and perhaps add some other clarifying items because the code in general is pretty big.
Can you look at fences that are there but not very useful?
Sure. Not a problem,
May I ask, Mr. Sharp, you a question about this? So I know the fiscal note was really high, $6 million on this, and so.
Most of that is because we get roughly 600 of these a year. And if we assume, say half of them, we go to the court and they say, yeah, you could have to go get that. Then we've got to hold it in the shelter until the judicial process is, and some of those, sometimes that's can be months, yeah. So the bulk of that cost was for additional space for kennel space, because that's basically about what we have in the shelter now. So it would be, we need more place to hold the animals.
Councilman Gamble.
Would it require more staff as well?
Yes, ma'am. We'd have to go to the court to get the, it's essentially a restraining order, and then go get the animal, and then bring it back, and then go to court for the judicial process. Then you gotta have people there to take care of the additional animals, to feed them and walk them and so forth. And so it's, yes, ma'am, it's,
And even
the most of that money, I think 4 million of that 6 million was kennel space.
4 million was for kennel,
Yes, ma'am.
2 million staff.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilwoman Stiles.
So, to the question about what do we do for right now, that's part of the conversation that we're going to be having next week, is to figure out what could be a good interim solution, while of course, as the budget season is coming up, I'm certainly gonna be asking for more staff, because animal control is still very understaffed.
Councilwoman Johnston.
And do we anticipate, you say that there's roughly 600 of these complaints every year, or 600 complaints or 600 dogs?
There's 600 vicious dog complaints.
So it could be,
Under the current definition.
okay, so is it feasible to think that if we start enforcing something, that maybe people will get themselves into compliance so that maybe these complaints will go down, knowing that animal control can now come and take your dog at some point? So I would hope so. I would hope so, that's the goal.
Any other discussion? All right, so we have a deferral motion on the floor
For one meeting, yes.
for one meeting.
I'll move
For 1 meeting deferral.
Second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right. All right, our last bill, BL 2021-977 by O'Connell, provides for the designation of public property within specified areas of downtown Nashville as a temporary special event zone during the time period beginning at 9:00 p.m. on December 30th, 2021, ending at 6:00 a.m. on January 1st, 2022, relative to the use of these areas in conjunction with the 2021 New Year's Eve celebration, related activities and events. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Councilman O'Connell.
Madam Chair, after a year of not really doing much of this, the CVC is doing special events again, and I think everybody will recall, these special event zones are really just for the major events, and they basically focus on things like how do you secure a perimeter and all that kind of thing. The CVC has a great track record of managing safe events, and so I'm happy to support this and encourage colleagues to as well.
All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. That was nicely done. That was not easy.